This is KC Sports Network, proudly presented by Emprise Bank.
What up, Chiefs Kingdom? Welcome to this special episode of KCSN Update. I'm DJ Kissel with a familiar guest. Anybody watching on YouTube, they know that face that they're looking at right now. And those who get to hear this beautiful voice right now, we are joined by former Chiefs punter Dustin Colquitt to talk a little Chiefs in the playoffs, a little Andy Reid. We're going to see where the conversation takes us. But Dustin, man, appreciate you joining us.
Glad to have you. Hey, I'm glad to be here. Good to see your face. And yeah, good to watch the Chiefs the other night. They looked good. It looked cold. I got a lot of texts, asking if I was there. And I was warm and watching it on TV. So, but it looked awesome. It looked like a great crowd showed up for him.
Yeah, I was not surprised. I was eager to see what the crowd was going to look like and sound like, because you test Chiefs Kingdom to see like how much will they take to be there, especially with a playoff game. We feel like if they win, maybe they get another home playoff game where some people could be like, you know what, I'm going to stay back, maybe get to the next one. But it looked full, looked crowded. I don't know about the tailgating scene. I wasn't out there. I was tempted to go out there and to give it a shot, but shout out everybody who was there, not just for being there, but still seemed loud. It seemed like they were having a good old time. You saw the swag surfing, which has been a thing the last few years. They get the crowd going when they start playing that, but looked like a good time. For you, when you're watching the game, like what stood out to you most just about their overall performance and putting together what I called yesterday during the 10 Things show I recorded, their most complete performance of the season? Yeah,
definitely. And I to piggyback off what you said about Chiefs fans in the stadium, Mark Donovan sure knows how to keep the lights on over there. It's one thing that, we saw on and off when I was playing there is, sometimes you see big vacant areas, lights off, and nobody's in there, and that's just not the case. And that's not just because of their, the success here in the AFC Championship games and going to, three Super Bowls, winning 2, and all that stuff here since 2020 in Miami. It's the best college football environment that NFL has to offer. The people live and die by the sword of Chiefs football. You can tell all week when they lose. You can tell all week when they win. Mm. And I thought they had a great showing. It was fun. With that snow and any of that humidity in the air, that barbecue probably gets all the way into Johnson County. People are smelling the game. There's no doubt. And, it's fun watching that. And, yeah, I laughed when they started saying $50, $40, $35 tickets. People are going to the game, right? I mean, so a good showing. And it was fun kind of watching them play off of each other. The one thing that I watched, I have to say, because he's a personal friend that I still keep up with, is I want to know quickly what kind of helmet Deshaun Elliott had on, because all of our guys need to be in that helmet. We know that is officially the safest helmet that you can ever play in. And, it was fun watching the staples that were there when I was playing really come into their own. When you're watching Chris Jones get double teamed and then it's open up new guys. Bolton had a big game with 10 plus sacks. I think it was somewhere around there. Rice, these guys that I never played with. We hear all these names we talked about earlier, coming out of training camp. This is going to be the guy, this guy, and this was a guy that really stepped up and had a huge game when he needed to.
It's got to be cool for you because so many of the guys personally, where a lot of the players I don't necessarily know as well. Even when I was working there, it wasn't like I personally knew guys, just around them quite a bit. But it's fun for me watching the games now, having been there and known some of the people that, like, when Mahomes' helmet breaks, then I'm immediately thinking, okay, Jay's on the sideline, probably figuring something out right now because, Jay's the helmet guy. And they show Mahomes on the sideline like Jay's messing with his helmet. That's the fun part of how that all works. But before we get too much into this, because I know there's some people listening that might not know, like, hey, what's Dustin doing now? What you have going on? Can you let the people know where you're living now and then just what you're doing and how you're staying connected to the game of football?
Yeah, definitely. So right now, me and my family are living in Knoxville, Tennessee. I got a job offer from the University of Tennessee where I got to play my college ball from Coach Heupel and Coach Eckler, the special teams coach, to be part of the special teams staff there. And I'm specifically working like quality control with the kickers and the punters. And we've got some really good kids in our stable right now, guys that are going to be kicking in the league for sure. Definitely the punter. We've got a couple of young kickers, one that's kicking off like Harrison Butker, and one that is going to have 4 years of eligibility that starts this year, and Max Gilbert. And so it's been a lot of fun to kind of take what I've learned over a 17-year career and also playing there for 4 years and kind of instilling it in those guys. So when they get into situations and games, we've already I'm just like a caddy basically. I'm in there every day. I get in there about 6:20, and then we bust up the film after practices. We're 3 days a week, kind of like we were in Kansas City, typical day. But it's been a lot of fun. I'm from Knoxville. Christia danced there, and so now my 2 older boys, they've been trying to figure out how to get back to Kansas City, which who knows what happens in the future. But right now, out of Knoxville, working, and then obviously doing some stuff with you, which has been a lot of fun to keep connecting the city. I'll be back. Anybody that's watching this, if you want to plug in for Children's Mercy Hospital, we have Red Hot Night. I'm doing the MC work again. It's our 20th anniversary, raising a bunch of money for those kids at the hospital. And so if you can tune into that, I'll never unplug from Kansas City. It's such a great town, not just a football town, a philanthropic town, and filled with great people that I love.
That's awesome. It's cool that you stay connected to the city, not just because of your friends and you work here and lived here for so long. And a lot of your kids grew up in here and they've got those relationships with their friends and people they stay in touch with. But the philanthropic stuff that you're still making a point to come back and be a part of and do. And I know that was a big deal to you when you were playing. It's really cool to see that it's maintained its genuineness in your heart as far as like what you care about, what you want to spend your time doing. And I want to ask you I'm going to ask you on the second half of the show about Andy Reid and just kind of you've got such a unique perspective, not just because you played for him, because you were there before and you got to see, and then you joined a couple other NFL teams. You got to see a lot of different perspective as far as how different coaches run their teams, how different organizations are set up. But before I do that, I do want to ask about one of the players that you just mentioned, because you get to see guys come in and develop. And you mentioned Chris Jones. I was watching the playoff game last night, watching DeMarcus Robinson go out and make plays for the Rams. And I remember him, a young kid, hanging out with Tyreek all the time, and then just watching him develop, get married, like have kids. And it's just cool, even from the outside, being around the guys a little bit, just to see that kind of maturation process. But for you, one of your buddies who is developed into not just one of the best kickers in the National Football League right now, but when you start adding up the success that he's had and start comparing it, and he's starting to get to some of those minimum requirements to be one of the most accurate kickers of all time, talking about Harrison Butker. How cool has it been for you to watch since the moment he arrived in Kansas City and Dave Toub stole him, I believe, from Carolina off a practice squad, to then becoming one of the greatest kickers that we've seen, at least in recent memory, if he keeps this up, of all time, because that's where the numbers are headed.
Yeah, absolutely. And I was in that workout in Kansas City. He actually didn't have the right size shoes. He wore my cleats and still had a really good workout inside. And I'm going like, man, you've got something big. I don't know what happened in Charlotte, but like, this is not that Dave needed me to say that, but I was like, this is a dude. Like he's really good. And it's funny, he kind of went out, I think, against Washington, maybe missed his first kick, but then he was really, really good the whole time that I was there in the Super Bowl. And this year he's really coming of his own. And it's interesting. I've been watching film all year because I'm watching film on our kickers, and I always like try to show our guys that are doing things good in the NFL. I know Bucker's gone to that. He kicks and then breaks a leg, looks like he does like a split squat and then comes up. And I think that's one of those interesting things that I don't know if he'll ever work that out. But at this point, why would you? I don't think he missed an extra point our year, maybe missed 2 field goals the most, I believe it is. And so it's fun watching him do his thing. Kickoff guy's got to be, other than Washington, maybe 95% for the year, but he had to be up in that conversation in the 90s too. Yeah. So it's been fun watching him, but man, off the field, I love when he goes to Georgia Tech, does that commencement speech, and he says the best thing that you can do is start a family, have kids, settle down. And that is what our generation does need to hear. All the unhappiness, the anxieties, the depressions, like all of those things, like what Harrison is saying, like when you lock down and really focus on what's important, the morality, Jesus, whatever your higher calling is, and then raising kids up to be that, we'll have a better society. So it's fun watching him off the field. He's a godfather to one of my kiddos. So like he is a great human being, and it's fun to watch. I don't even text, like during the season, unless something is like really awry, I don't say like, hey, look at this, look at that. This season, I have just been like, do your thing, because everything looks good in front of them. James Winchester has just done an unbelievable job, just like getting that ball right where you want it, where Tommy's not doing a whole lot of adjustments. Tommy has had a great season holding. And so it's been fun to watch those boys. And in that cold weather, you have to hold it. The fish come in I remember we played them in 2008. They flew into an 89-degree temperature change, ended up beating us like 39, 31 or so. And so they held down the fort yesterday for those blue-collared Kansas City fans that are going to come out rain and shine or snow.
I was meaning to ask you this because with the holding, with the weather being what it is, I know you can keep your hands in warm and like a pack behind you, but is that like a much more difficult thing? Because I know you held all the kicks, whether it's an extra point, field goal or whatever. It feels like Tommy's job on that, with the weather being what it is one of those, like, if something's going to go awry, catching a ice football being thrown at you as fast as it is from that distance, that's something that very easily could go wrong.
Yeah, and it's tough because, James, when he's snapping the ball, he's putting where it becomes difficult is he's putting the tip on that ball on the wet ground and then snapping it back. And that wet tip is basically coming and you're catching it with your backstop, your backhand, and then you have a guide hand, kind of like basketball. And so, but he is like James for the past, really 21, 22, 23, he is really coming to his own snapping, both on shorts and longs. And Tommy this year just was lights out. Laces, like when I see guys miss kicks, and I watched it all year, extra points, field goals and stuff like that, their laces are wrong or the wrong lean. It is the kicker, but like when you don't get it right off the start, that had been the problem in the past. And this year it was super clean. It was very impressive.
Yeah. So obviously Chiefs get the win over the Dolphins. We broke it down. We've had a couple shows about it, but looking forward, most likely scenarios, the Chiefs end up playing Buffalo, going to what's going to be weather, whether it's just cold, whether it's snow on the ground. We don't know what it's going to look like in Buffalo, but coming off the most complete victory that we've seen, we know that, this team is playoff tested in that they know how to handle themselves. They know how to kind of internally handle the adrenaline that comes with stepping on the field during a playoff game, where it just feels a little bit different, being able to handle those things. How far do you see this? Do you know some of these guys in this room? Like, how far do you see this group going with some of the struggles that we had seen especially offensively from this team? Where do you see the ceiling of this team going? Do you think they can go all the way?
I do, I think that, when I watch the Chiefs right now, obviously you have you have two of the best players in the National Football League at their respective positions between Mahomes and Kelsey. Mm-hmm. And when you have that much continuity on one side of the ball, you have three quarterbacks, because Andy can't step over that line and be a quarterback, but anything that he draws up, thinks about, and has a seasoned offensive coordinator, the Matt Nagy's of this world, that is a cerebral version of like, hey, this may or may not work, this might. And so you get options. I always like listening to Tom Moore, Peyton Manning's offensive coordinator, because he goes, I don't give him plays. I give him recommendations. I give him two options, and then he goes out and does his thing. Now, this is a little bit different. When I watch, Bieniemy was very good in maintaining the personality of that run game and holding stuff together, and Nagy has very good qualities too. And so the mastermind between Andy and Pat is what in the postseason not everybody gets, not everybody has. And because sometimes it's the first time people are being in the playoffs, but not for Kansas City, and not since 2019 season, where we had ups, downs, injuries, in and outs, and then we just even face the adversity of down by 20, down by 21, 24, whatever it is. They've been through every storm. And so when I said what I said a week ago, that you got to be crazy if you don't think the Chiefs are going to be in the thick of this Super Bowl run, I said that because I saw the Phillies of this world on a 1-4 slide. I see San Francisco, when the lights come on, throwing 4 picks out of Purdy, which has been a lot of fun to watch. And so, and man, the only thing that I see that's tough is the ability, like, we're not going to be able to more than likely do it in Kansas City if this keeps shuffling. That's the tough part. But what we also haven't seen is, Green Bay is up and coming. Love had a great game last night. That was fun to watch. But we get a couple calls in that Green Bay game. We win that game. We are so close to being a 13-win season, hitting the playoffs anyway. So we have to look at some of those things. If we get calls like that down the stretch or during the regular season, we've won 13 games.
Yeah, you can look at it either way. We've argued about this with Chiefs fans all year, is that as much as like, oh, they suck, trade everybody this, and again, they lost one game by more than one possession. You can count on one hand how many times Patrick Mahomes in his career has lost by more than one possession, that they're in it. You could say if Kadarius Toney doesn't line up off sides, they beat Buffalo in that game if that touchdown stands on that crazy play with the lateral with Travis Kelce. But
it's unbelievable.
It's funny you talk about this dynasty and all of these playoff experiences and the game against Houston, that I've said this before, that the Chiefs dynasty, or whatever you want to call it, this golden age of Chiefs football right now that we're living in, if you had to pick one play that kind of changed the trajectory of it becoming what it has, it's Daniel Sorensen making a tackle on a fake punt.
Yeah.
That started that comeback in that game, which led to the run to win the Super Bowl. It all started with that, and then it was the fumble recovery on the ensuing kickoff after the next touchdown. But it was Daniel Sorensen, the little thing, being in the right place, knowing his job responsibility, and coming up and making the tackle on, I believe it was Justin Reid, on that play that he came up and made the tackle on to kind of get this started for the Chiefs. And I won't ever forget those types of moments because it's where everything started.
Yeah, definitely. And obviously as Chiefs now, I'm a Chiefs fan, but still when I was playing, I was a Chiefs fan, especially when Patrick was throwing the ball because I wasn't punting as much. I was more holding and stuff. But, what I tell, all the Chiefs fans listening, when people talk about a 15% chance of rain, there's an 85% chance it's not going to rain. And I know that when we get in these situations, we don't know if we're going to get a bogus call like the rushing the passer penalty against Tom Brady that would have put us in the Super Bowl, and I guarantee you we beat those Rams, right? I mean, that was one of the most exciting games ever for me to watch because there were so many punts. But for everybody else, it was a complete snoozer. There was people leaving the entire time after they saw like 7 or 8 punts go. They're like, I'm done. We're going out in Buckhead or whatever. But like when I see that, we're built for situations for other teams making mistakes, critical errors through analytics or whatever they're deciding to put really high in their regime, where we're not counting on analytics. We're lining up with our best players, spending 108% of our cash and going to try to kick your butt. And so we're not relying on some of that, like if Tua can, throw the ball downfield with Chris Jones, Karl Loftus. We haven't even talked about him yet. He had a sack and a half in that game and looked like Tamba Ali with a straight arm pushing that guy in the backfield, disrupting anything that they could possibly doing. Your timing's off in Tyreek Hill if that happens. You get into that, him thinking about somebody, coming into you like that in the backfield like they were all day. And secondary, Snead, obviously everybody knows what kind of year he's had. I feel like between Taylor Swift and him, they're getting the most like camera time in that stadium right now because they're playing an elite way.
I have to laugh. I was just talking to Tucker before we started recording that Tyreek tweeted out that the NFL tweeted out an ISO shot on video of the L'Jarius Sneed pressing Tyreek into the ground, just like knocking him down. And Tyreek quote tweeted and just said like, he jammed my ass to Cancun. Like he owned it. He didn't try to make excuses. He tweeted the thing about Baldy, about being open to the double coverage and all that. And it was like kind of defensive, but every player's got a little chip. They're all competitive. But then with the one with Snead, he's like, yeah, he sent me to Cancun.
And I think Ty's, when you first get out of a building, I remember in Kansas City, that was really tough to be released. I was told that, I said, hey, if you're going to release me, it's 15 years. I won a Super Bowl. Just let me know. Let me hit free agency. I've got, teams that sound like they're interested. No, we're going to keep you, let you compete. And then they release you and you're bitter for a couple of years. It's tough. Tyreek's the same way because what he was thinking is, man, once you win that first Super Bowl, I remember once we won that, I was having dreams. I was like, we're going to win 3 straight Super Bowls. Like, I had this vision of red, and I was like, maybe it's Tampa Bay. Maybe, I don't know. But like, I sure did feel like we had the guys in this room. And after you listen to somebody like Andy Reid, at 1-5, not hit the panic button and go over and beat Detroit and London and Wembley Stadium, and then come back and win in 11 straight games. You can come back from anything. Coming back from 4 deficits, 4 deficits, whatever, that Super Bowl year, 2019, 2020. Those guys, especially the leaders in that room, the captains that you're seeing wear that C on their chest or in the playoff games, those guys have been through a lot of stuff and a lot of stuff in the offseason to get ready. Like, after the first one, it's kind of like, oh my gosh, like, we can do this. And you see, and then you see like how the fans react and how much better the work week goes in Kansas City. I mean, it's definitely a playoff of each other. Like, you go down to Miami and you win a game and they're like, the Dolphins won. Okay, that was interesting. I was on my yacht. Like, I wasn't tuned in, and I was on South Beach. But in Kansas City, people are living, loving, they're running. People are in shape. They're going to the Ozarks. They're watching Chiefs football. They drive 40 minutes and watch KU play. Like, I mean, sports is kind of in the center. Water sports, or like the basketball, like that's a lot. That's soccer, a little bit of a religion. Now,
and soccer is going crazy.
That's been fun. I've been trying to get into that locker room to train with some of those players. I played soccer my whole life. I was going to go to Brown University and play soccer. I wanted to go in there and just interview some of those girls. It's amazing. We're building the first women's soccer stadium ever. How's that going, by the way? Is it going?
It's good. Yeah. Good. No, it seems to be going well. They put out a press release like every day for a different vendor. They're gonna have Joe's inside of there, nice. Boulevard, all the cool local businesses. They got a lot of cool stuff going on. I got a good friend, and Danny Welniak. You know Danny?
Yeah, I love her.
She's over there running PR for them, so to still stay in touch with her, and they're keeping her busy right now.
I bet.
But I've got so many questions and stories I want to pull out of you with some of these guys that I know some of them. You've got some good ones on Patrick Mahomes, Travis Kelce, and Andy Reid. We're going to get to those stories right after this quick break, hanging out with Dustin Colquitt.
Thanks for listening to KC Sports Network. Make sure you download our new app. Find it on the App Store or Google Play. Just search KC Sports Network.
Welcome back to KCSN Update. BJ Kissel hanging out with Dustin Colquitt. All right, Dustin, we got thoughts on Chiefs playoffs, where they're at right now, but I want to pull some of these stories out of you because, again, you have such a unique perspective for where the Chiefs organization is right now. You kind of were there before it kind of got to this winning culture part of it, and then what it's done with Andy Reid so far. The question I want to ask first, and I don't think I've ever asked you this before, is when Andy Reid first got to Kansas City in 2013 and he arrived, you obviously knew the pedigree, you knew the success that he had in Philadelphia. But for you, when was a moment, if you remember, if there was a one time where you're like, this is going to be different, like I can just feel that this is heading the right direction? When was the moment, or what was the situation of something that he did where it just clicked for you, like, this is it, like this is going to get us on the right path?
Yeah, two things that stick out that were like just personal experiences for me is I remember I was training for the Pro Bowl in Hawaii, and the Chiefs were letting me come in and kind of kick in the indoor facility because it was like frozen tundra, late in KC before that game. And he's obviously in the building for a few weeks, and I'd been working out and doing stuff, and I had somebody come down on the field. I had like headphones on and like just started my workout doing. And so I want to say, gosh, I do not remember who that was. But somebody came down on the field, kind of tapped my shoulder and was like, "Hey, Andy Reid wants to talk to you." And so I was like, I took my headphones off, like, okay. And he goes, "No, not right now. He wants you to finish your workout. He wants you to kick, do what you do here. He doesn't want to mess with any of that. But then after you're done, go and talk to him." And so I sat after I got done kicking, do all stuff. Now, believe me, I'm not even thinking about kicking and stuff. I'm like, I'm about to go, talk to Andy Reid for the first time. And this is a small market team that gets this, bigger than life, literally, physically, everything, version of like the best coach that, you think of. You think of Donovan, like he made Donovan McNabb who he was. And so that was fun watching that team. So anyway, I'm talking to him, and he goes, "Hey, I have to ask you this one question." And so I was like, "Yeah, shoot. Like, you want to talk to the punter? Cool." And he was like, are you done with Kansas City? Do you not like the town? Is it just like what you've been going through the past, 8 years, prior to us getting here? We're like, what's your vibe on wanting to stay? And so I was like, this is the best town that you will ever coach in. And a lot of like, I don't know where you're going with this. I've run a little charity here for a long time, but everybody talks about, Northeast medicine, the West Coast, wherever. This is the best people you'll ever come in contact with, most hardest playing, hardest working people town. The cost of living is great. It's probably changed here in the last 2 years. But like, you're going to absolutely love it here. He actually pulled me aside, like probably 3 years after that. He goes, "You're right. What a town that you have lived in." So he goes, "I just had to hear that. Go over and play your game, take care of business. And when you get back, you're going to take care of your contract." And so I was like, "Oh my gosh." Like cried. He goes, "All right, get back down there and start working out." And he said something that's easy. He goes, "I want you got to start, keep that weight on. If I see my punter lose his butt, he's out. He's out of here." And so I realized that like he wanted you to just hone your craft, make that the most important thing, the family, and then just working up. Why are you here in this room? Don't waste your time while you're here, which I loved. And then I think the second time, what he always is great about doing is I was in a just heat 2013 in training camp. We have something go down right before one of our punting periods. And Dave's like, specialists go up when they're not playing. We do a little lift. They usually sent like Travis Crittenden or somebody up to like work us out. We'd come back down, and those are almost 3-hour practices. And so our punt period is at the very end. Well, something doesn't go right, and Andy and them, they're kind of yelling back and forth. And so me and Tobe goes, "We're charting 20 punts right now." And I was like, Well, look, I'll do it, but it's got to be after the period because that's where the eye in the sky doesn't lie. I don't want to look bad that period. I'll be tired if we do that many. He goes, "Oh no, we're doing them now." So we had this like spat. It goes back and forth, and it gets to the point where Andy's like, "Hey," like we get, and then after the practice, we put our hands in like we do every time, suck up the hand, go in, gaff, and Dave's like, "Boom, we're kicking." And so I was like, "No, listen, I'm a worker bee. But like I got to do it after that, not like." So anyway, we had this spat. So this is the second time somebody comes and taps my shoulder. He goes, "Andy wants to see you." And I was like, "Oh man, I'm getting cut. Like this is like not good. This is like my first year under contract with these guys. I got, thank God, it's the first time I've ever had guaranteed money in my life. And a bunch of kids at that 13. I got 5 kids, 4 kids, one on the way, and I'm like, this is not a good look. And so anyway, he comes in, he goes, "Hey, what's going on the field? Like you're the punter. Like we have problems with all kinds of guys. We don't need any out of you kind of deal." That's where I'm suspecting this to go. And so he's like, "Hey, what's going on with that?" I was like, "Well, he's wanting me to kick right now. And then we have a field goal period and I'll be tired. And then everybody's like, what's wrong with the kicker?" And I feel great. I don't want to be, dragging in that last punt period. And he goes, "Takes an ego to stay in this league. All right, see ya." And then just keep eating again. And I was like, "Dude, this guy's amazing." So he wants you to build a bully, get on that field, don't do anything, do everything in between the whistles. If you see a number that gets you, take a mental note of it, get him back, but don't do anything to hurt the football team. You let your personality show. That's Andy Reid football. That's why he's freaking successful.
That's an awesome story that shows, and it sometimes it's hard to quantify or tell stories about the way, the reason why players who've played for Andy Reid feel a certain way about him. And it's not the same thing, it's not close to the same thing, but we'd kind of brought it up the last couple of weeks with the last regular season game and the incentives and the contracts for players. And is Travis Kelce going to get to 1,000 yards for the 8th straight season? Is Chris Jones going to be allowed to play against the Chargers to get his bonus? And I remember the way in watching the press conference where Andy Reid was asked, how do you handle letting guys play for incentives? And he said, it depends on the incentive. And I remember thinking, and I was guessing, kind of reading between the lines, and I remember thinking, if there's a significant amount of money on the line, Andy Reid's not going to stand in the way of a player who negotiated for that contract with his agent to get a chance to get that money. But if it's just a superlative on 1,000 yards, like Travis's. I don't know if there was any money on Travis's contract for 1,000 yards. Be a little surprised if it was a lot because he was doing it so much. But I just remember thinking, handling that kind of situation correctly, where you don't piss off some players you let play, some you don't. How do you do that while maintaining some sort of black and white consistency to how you handle those situations? Andy Reid handles those things perfectly, which is why consistently players talk well about him. And so being able to hear that story about the way that he handled you and not knowing you that well in that moment, it perfectly illustrates in a great way how Andy Reid is with players. It's funny that you kind of didn't cower to him. You kind of, this is why I did it. This was my reason for it. The only story I have similar, I probably told you this story before. It was for me personally, going in the locker room once. I was going to interview Sherm about something. I was doing a story on Barry Rubin, and I walked in the locker room after open media during season because, players hanging out in Allen's office, like they're back in the equipment room. Media leaves, everybody comes flooding in. And I walk in, beeline straight for Sherm to ask him a question about Barry, who told me to talk to Sherm because it was one of his guys. I don't get within like 20 feet of Sherm, and he's yelling everyone in the locker room. I had only been there like a year or two. Like, guys didn't know me all that well. And he's like, media's not allowed in here, like making a big scene of it. I just kept walking straight towards him. He didn't know where I was going, and I was just making my way straight to him. Every step I took, he was yelling louder and louder. You can't be in here. Get out of here. No media. Get out of here. And I got close, and I was like, I just have questions for you. I just have a couple of questions. I'm doing a story on Barry. He's like, did I say I cared? And I finally just snapped, and I was like, Barry said you were a good dude. I'm trying to write this story on the guy. I'm going to go back and tell him that you don't give a shit enough about him to give me a comment. And he's just like, dude, you don't have to be a dick. Like, he completely changed his mind. And he's like, you don't have to be a dick, man. We're cool. What do you got? And ever since that moment, Sherm was cool as hell to me ever since then. Because I was like, you know what? Screw this. This is why I'm here. This is what I'm trying to do. And he's like, all right, you don't have to be a dick. And then Jamal was there and started laughing. That's why I know it was one of the first years, because Jamal was in there. His locker was right by Sherm's, and he starts laughing. But it was one of those, like, you just kind of let him know, like, no, I'm here and this is what I'm doing. Kind of respected it, I guess, a little bit. And I've had a good relationship with him ever since.
Oh, sure. And Sherman's great. That's one of my favorite all-time Chiefs guys that made that transition from Arizona. Arizona, he wore all the affliction garb and had like the gargoyle tattoo things. And then like he gets over to Kansas City hunting, wearing camo, changes it to an American Eagle, all the things. And so he became like one of my really close friends. We were always together. I would decorate his room in training camp, and then he'd throw all the shit out in the hallway. I had an RV, and so I would take all of the old like RV like fluffy pillows, however they do like the the RV stamp on the decorations. I would decorate his whole room for him, and he'd come in. He's like, "Who did this shit? This is unbelievable." Why do you know how Sherm is just all over it? He is like badgering people until somebody's like, "All right, we did it." Like, Sherm, just knock it off. Like, please. He's just gonna get at you until figure it out. But he is one of the most selfless people that in a locker room situation you could ever meet, in a dying position in the NFL, that would do absolutely anything for anybody in that locker room, no matter where they come from, no matter what they look like, no matter how they act during the week. If it benefits the team, Sherm's there. He was always that guy. We had that great, like, sometimes I was like, man, Dave, this special teams, this punt cover team is a little bit too white for me. They're not very fast. Like, this is killing me, bro. And Sherm was like, hey, man, they're not going to get through. You can still punt this way. You just got to hang it a little bit more. And I'm like, oh, gosh. And so, like, I love some of those little stories in there that, that we could laugh about. And just some of my teammates that would laugh are like, Dustin, what are you talking about?
I just laugh because every time I saw Sherm, whenever we travel, Sherm was always behind either Alex when he was the quarterback or Patrick when he became the quarterback. He was literally like the bodyguard for the quarterbacks. Oh. Whenever they got off the plane, anybody tried to talk to him, anybody tried to bother, he was like the police for the locker room. And when we were traveled, like, he was always right there by the quarterback, just making sure that nobody stopped them or distracted them. He took it very seriously too.
Oh, awesome. Totally. And like, he was always like, he may never be that guy that is out front being a disruptor and, put like, he would knock people out. Don't get me wrong. But like, especially when you're running those long distances on a punt or kickoff, you're never that first in, but you got to watch out on that second level because he will knock a ball loose. He was always great about that and ripping people up off the ground that were on our team that got hit. Or if you step on somebody's fingers or anything like that, your ass is back. Your back's on the grass if you're on the other team. He was always that enforcer. You knew it was coming. Him and DJ Alexander during that couple of era. Those guys, I remember seeing a lot of early fair catch signs and guys on their backs right on the line of scrimmage. And that's Anthony Sherman. It's Frank Zombo, DJ Alexander. I don't know how his neck is still as long as it used to be. DJ would torpedo
DJ Alexander.
Oh, God, I loved him.
I forgot it.
I loved him.
Good dude. He's a good. That whole draft class that year with, God, who was the other linebacker from Georgia? Hakeem. 51.
Yes. Gosh. With the dreads.
Dang it. This is gonna bother me.
Oh, it's gonna bother me too. I hate when that happens.
Rakeem Wilson.
Wilson. There you go.
Yeah, Rakeem Wilson.
Yep.
DJ Alexander. That whole draft class that Doris brought in that year was awesome. Now I want to ask a couple more questions because you played the guys you mentioned earlier, 2 first ballot Hall of Famers as we stand today before their careers are even done with Patrick Mahomes and Travis, I'm going to say Kels. And you mentioned, I got to ask this first. Did you know that it's Kels? Like technically that's how you pronounce his last name? Because Andy Reid has said that forever. Everybody else has said Kelsey. Kelsey never corrected anybody. Yeah. And then come to find out last year that it actually is Kels. Did you know that?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. And so, like, the funny thing is like, whether we were like flying around to Blues hockey games or anything like that, these people would come up like the commissioner of NHL or like, they like Travis Kelce. Oh, it's great to, and I'm going like, and he'd be like, you don't have to like correct everybody or whatever. I'd have a Christmas party every year, have my neighbors and teammates and stuff over, and the neighbors would be like, oh, Kelce, get it. And I'm like, and he's like, don't. Paul Rudd in the basement, man, Kelce, you're fun. We got your jersey. I'd get like a player's jersey every year. So like, obviously Kelce's 2013, whoever the 14, 15, Tyreek Hill, 16, whoever it was. And, or if it was 2, if it was Kareem Hunt. Anyway, it was always Kelce. But he would always be like, don't worry about it. I want to press. So, I mean, at this point, it's Travis Kelce. I mean, I'll say Kels if I'm talking about him, but like it's because people are like, wait, who? You mean Kelce? And so it's to the point where we're like, you know what? Just let's go with the Kelce part.
That's nuts. I covered him for 6 years and I never got correct. I never knew until last year. I was like, are you kidding me? How did I not know this? But curious your thoughts. We'll start with him and then we'll get to Mahomes on when you knew. And his was a little different because he came in and needed that push from Andy Reid. And he's talked about it a lot when he came in. He was younger, kind of did some dumb stuff or didn't take it as seriously. And then something clicked for him and he could speak to that. But for you, when did you know that you had something really special? Not just like a solid player, but somebody that was going to ultimately go down as the greatest tight end to ever play the game whenever he decides to kind of hang him up. Was there a moment or a story that you could share being at practice or something where you're like, this guy has got something really special?
Yeah, definitely. And he's like one of the most, as you know, fluid catch and run guys that you could ever see. And it's one of those moves that like, as you're watching the game, you would think, how has this guy's kidneys not been blown out multiple times? But people just can't get that rounded pattern after he catches a ball. It's like, he'll dip under. He's 6'6" or something like that, and he's dipping under guys' tackles. Like, how do you do that? He's very agile. He was fighting a microfracture in his knee his freshman year. Listen, you can tell I've been in college for a season. His rookie year and was a wing on field goal in and off through like 2015, actually through 2017 in the Pro Bowl. We even threw a fake field goal. Steelers at home. So I'm trying to think of like all of the things where he was kind of like not hit or miss. It was like, can you count on him? Yeah. And when I realized how important he was, one was hanging up, at Christmas parties or like getting out with him and about dinners and stuff like that. I realized this is a kid that's passionate about football. passionate about fashion. Anything that he's into, it's 100%. In the beginning, it's easy. First time you get a little money in your pocket and you're still kind of going out doing. And so once he started having like girlfriends, he was in. He was a solo guy, which I really like. It says a lot. But when I saw how important he was when he got a concussion and out against the Titans in that playoff game. You realize like he is integral to our offense. Andy Reid knew it. If he was late for a meeting or anything like that, he would like. And what Andy's really, really good at is treating everybody the same, differently. And in the beginning, you had to treat Travis a little bit differently because you knew he was a superstar. He was Chicago Bulls like Dennis Rodman type, where Phil Jackson steps back and goes, "We're going to give you 3 days off." And Jordan's going, "What are you talking about? He's not even going to come back if you give him 3 days. Like, what's his state going to be coming back?" But Travis, he got it right. It only took a couple of those things from Big Red to say, "Look, we can't not have you play, especially the first and second half. You're out the first half, bro. Get your head on straight." And so once he got back, though, he had like a big transition of where you could really count on him to deliver, not just on the field, but once he was part of that unity council. Andy is good about doing stuff like that. He's like, "You know what, bro? Your ass is in the unity council." And so, you got to be at that meeting. And so I think that it's fun watching his maturation process on the field, but also on that sidelines. I mean, he's juicy on that sidelines. He's excited for everybody on offense, defense, special teams. I've never had a whole lot of guys just get totally pumped up about a big punt that's not on the defensive side of the ball because it helps them out more. Obviously, those big guys like running that big diagonal line into that 10-yard line. But he would get stoked about, big kicks, big punts, big tackles. And so you got to have a guy that brings that kind of juice every day.
I still think to this day, and I've talked about it a couple of times, to this day, my favorite interview I've ever had when I was working at the Chiefs was with Travis. It was at the Radio Row of the Super Bowl. It was the Patriots-Falcons Super Bowl. And I went down to cover it because everyone in the NFL that does media goes to the Super Bowl for Radio Row week. So you can get a lot of interviews with a lot of different people. It's actually where we sat down and we interviewed Patrick Mahomes 3 months before they drafted him. Like, we have that sit-down interview, which, looking back, is the coolest interview that we have, that we were able to save that video because his agent, or his Matt Stenberg, Lee's kid, was walking around with him. I think Chris is probably around somewhere, but Matt was walking around saying, "Do you want to interview Patrick Mahomes?" I was like, "Yes." Like, I'm a K-State fan, watched Big 12. We may take a quarterback. Yes, sit him down. Well, we interviewed him. But in talking with Travis, I'll never forget him telling the story. And I think he was referencing the Pro Bowl from the year before. But he talked about talking with Tony Gonzalez and how much Tony helped him in that Tony said, "You will have a platform to stand up and have your teammates listen to you a few years before you realize you have that platform." And Travis didn't know he had that platform. And it was kind of that tweener, like, he was one of the best players, but do I have the standing to call somebody out in front of the team? How comfortable do I need to be in my own skin with my role in this team to do that? And he said getting voted as a captain for the playoffs changed everything as far as how he felt as a leader within that locker room. And it was one of the more genuine, just having a conversation where instead of like a Q&A, he was explaining something in a dynamic that I hadn't heard before. And it's still one of the most poignant interviews I remember having with him, of him being so mentally aware of leadership and what he needed to be for that room and kind of working through it. And he said Tony helped him as much as anybody. So it's cool to hear you kind of say the same things. Everybody knew he had talent. It was just a matter of, is it all going to fall into place for him to go do it?
Yeah, definitely. And one of the creepier pictures that we get to take when you're a playoff captain, which we got to take a bunch of them once Andy Reid got to town. But I remember like that first time he was a captain, and I had to give him a tie. Like, he was like, I was like, oh God, yeah, it's the suit. I don't know if it was like a 2020 Zoom call. Like, I don't think he had suit pants on. We had to kind of like hide him in the back. And so, but you could kind of see him like, oh my gosh, like take on more and more responsibility, and I loved watching, and I hope this doesn't come off as negative, it's just facts, is you see a guy going from picking up flags and throwing them and doing stuff like that to really settling into what you're saying, one of the best tight ends ever. I remember Tony Gonzalez helped me, because I remember after a long practice, I would be like, all right, keep doing the thumbs.
That's awesome.
I love it. And I remember watching Tony Gonzalez after practice, just catching balls and doing all of this stuff like above and beyond. He'd get off that thing, off the practice field 45 minutes after, where we're still all working out. Then he'd come in and get a workout and then do jump rope, hit the sauna and steam room and do all. And I'm like, this guy, no wonder why he's doing it. So I am not a bit surprised. And Tony wants you to affect you to the core. Just to give you an example of what he did for Travis, for me, I remember Tony's last year here before he went to Atlanta, I think in 2012, was he here in 11, right? Or no, he wasn't here. He was gone in 9. So his last year, 8. Herm Edwards' last year, I was Tony's plane partner, sat right next to him on the plane. Mm-hmm. Kyle Turley was right behind me. And so I got a lot of wisdom going back from different like angles, from both of those two guys. But I remember I ordered a steak on the plane, because you eat great on those charter flights, and they want you to be full of energy, no excuses, no holds bar. And so I ordered this thing, and Tony's like, no, he'll do the fish. And I was like, oh, no, I don't want fish on a plane. And he goes, no, you don't want that steak. It'll slow you down. I'm like, I don't need to be fast. I just need to hit, high hang time balls so it doesn't come back this way. And he goes, he'll do the fish. I got 2 pieces. There should be 2 back there, 1 for him. And I'm going like, so he's going to like dictate what I eat if I sit next to him? And like, I thought this was going to be a fun process. So as the flight goes, they're like, do you want any cookies and milk? And I'm like, yeah, I'll do both. And he's like, no, you're not going to do that. I have this, gluten-free, before gluten-free was a thing, like this little brownie, but it's like a protein brownie. It's going to be great, and he'll do that. And I'm like, so I can't do red meat or and he's like, no, it's the sugars. You got to stay away from that. And it's going to just slow you down. And I remember going like, all right, I got to clean up what I'm doing off the field if I want to last as long and as good as this guy has been. And Will Shields was the same way. I mean, those guys, every part of their game was thought out. And so that's when I started doing that, and just being a stool for a guy. If he comes in and because I had stuff going on in my life that I didn't want to bring into work, and all of us do. And so I remember those guys being there when I needed them. Trent Green, Eddie Kennison, all those older guys. And I remember going like, I've got to be like this for this new wave of guys. And it's crazy. I've gotten to play with those 2 first ballot Hall of Famers. Mm-hmm. And now with Kelsey Mahomes, watching them, and Chris Jones. I mean, nobody says that about him. Maybe they're starting to say it right now. He's a dude. He's a wrecking ball.
Yeah, he is carving out a niche for himself, and his next wave will be interesting. But let's talk about Mahomes a little bit in the moment. I've got a story I've told 1,000 times, but curious for you, because that last year, the year he got drafted, when he was sitting, he'll tell you, he's talked about before, like he needed that time to sit. He needed that time to learn, and that he wasn't going to be the 2018 of Patrick Mahomes if he played right away. Right. Which I think some fans rewriting history that would have been that way. And I think if you ask Mahomes, he was not ready for that. Not that he wouldn't have been good. Don't get me wrong, but not at the level that we saw. When did you know that it was special? Not just the arm talent, but when did you know that it was all there for this kid? If he put it all together and it worked out the way that it was seemingly starting to.
Yeah, I think that goes with kind of his work ethic and his competitive level. I remember when Chase Daniel was the backup quarterback before he was, and Chase had a great team building mentality where he could play that two offense against the number 1 defense and throw you some picks and let a linebacker get lucky and bat a ball that comes down to the safety, and the defense like freaks out, and it's a warm fuzzy feeling at practice and training camp and stuff like that. And Chase could handle that and also pick them apart and be that clipboard guy that is in Alex's ear and getting things, anything that Doug or Nagy or anything wasn't getting across, that I'm a player now perspective that he could give to Alex.
Yeah.
But when Alex and Mahomes were together, I remember watching those second team, like the OTAs, and then those second team offense versus the first team defense. And Mahomes didn't give them shit, like nothing.
Yeah.
Like he's like, I'm not throwing picks so you guys feel good. I'm carving you up so you get the experience of you feeling what I'm doing at practice. So like it was a whole nother level. Now maybe when he says, I wasn't ready, that's because God fashioned it in such that Alex Smith was there first. And so who knows? We don't even have to have that argument because we know he's ready. And we know that in 18, like he was fully ready. And it was because of some calls at the end there, like the D Ford stuff that you're just like, oh my gosh. So anyway, but what Alex was able to give to Patrick to kind of fully get him like ready for that first start, like he did in Denver during the regular season, I think what mimicked and mirrored that was for the first time in 2013, we had depth at every position. We had continuity in our box where everybody was on the same page of winning, whether that's business and football or however that went. And we watched Andy Reid bringing a young Brett Veach in that little Philly wheelhouse, but tutelaged by John Dorsey first, so he could gain any experience that he needed to before Veach was the guy. I'm sure that was kind of part of the plan all along. I can't speak of that because I don't know. I'm not in those conversations, but I got to watch Alex Smith and Mahomes and also, Coach Dorsey and Veach really sharpen each other in a process that was fun to kind of organically see happen. Veach has listened to everything, Dorsey does. Sometimes you got to have these big heads, and Dorsey and Reid and Clark just saying, hey, this is a small market, but you guys don't understand our history. We have an opportunity to do all things, not just some things, all things. And so that was fun to watch on the executive side and on the playing field with the quarterbacks, mentoring Brett Veach into this spot, which now obviously he kills it. I remember being in OTA workouts and the guy's constantly, either working out, but has a phone on, making that next move. Who can we get here? What can we do? And that's what Andy loves about him.
Yeah. I've told the story before, but it's one of my favorite stories regarding Mahomes, and that it was I was told after it happened, it was the last practice of mandatory minicamp in middle of June. So it's the last practice before you get like 7 weeks off, and then everybody reports the training camp. It was the year that it was his first year as a starter. So it was that 2018 year. Alex is traded, and Mahomes is going to be the guy. That the idea was that Bob Sutton was going to throw so many blitzes and unscouted looks at Mahomes that he felt like he was unprepared. So he spent the next 7 weeks like studying and being like, I thought I was here, but I'm further behind. They were going to try to stump him a little bit to get him motivated during the off before training camp. And the way that it was explained is that as they were walking off the field after practice, Bob turned around and looked at Andy and just kind of threw his hands up like, I don't know what to do, because Mahomes tore it apart. He had an answer for everything, even things he hadn't seen before. He did the right thing. And then the way that it was explained to me and the story was told is Bob just kind of looked at Coach like, I don't know what you want me to do. And that was internally for a lot of the coaches, one of the moments where everyone's like, not only is he talented, not only do we think he can get it, there's something special going on here with what we're about to witness. And then we saw one of the greatest 2 seasons for a quarterback statistically in NFL history. And I'll never forget them explaining they tried to stump him and it didn't work.
Well, my whole career, I mean, we've had some good quarterbacks here, and obviously, Trent Green was here when I first got here, and the timing between him, Eddie Kennison, Tony Gonzalez. You don't need timing with Tony. Tony'd go up and get a ball just like he's playing NBA basketball at will. But then you also have a timing route coming over the top in Eddie Kennison that it doesn't matter what you do. Like that was going to be a completed pass, especially at home. Yeah. They just had that figured out. And so I know exactly what you're talking about and what practice, because when Mahomes got here, since 1982, we hadn't drafted a quarterback, and it happens in my time. And so I'm like, I don't want to go in and work out. I'll work out after practice. I want to watch what's going on here. This is like historical. And I was old enough to have that kind of mentality or in the back of my head, like I want to see what he's doing. And so we would wait out there and like kind of watch him. And BJ, it wasn't like he was throwing in a one defense full of blitzes, he was throwing timing routes. He was threading needles over the top. Right as the DB is looking back, the ball's already in his blind spot in receiver's hands on our number one quarterbacks and safeties, guys that can't do anything about it. And so you're watching this kid and you're going like, he's playing pissed and to prove you wrong every day. And that's what he does now that I'm away from the practice facility and not a part of the organization anymore, except for talking about him, is I know that's what he still does, because he wants to beat you every day, not on Monday, Thursday, Sunday, every freaking day.
I think it reminds me of the story. I think it was The Last Dance, the documentary on Michael Jordan and the Bulls teams, where one of his teammates, because Jordan used to go around and try to play games or whatever, play card games to take everybody's money. I remember who it was. Said he sat in the front, just didn't have it, had like $5 in his pocket. And he said Jordan came up and like played him for a game to take his money. The guy goes, you're playing for hundreds, thousands of dollars in the back of the plane. Like, why are you coming to take my $5? He goes, I want your money in my pocket. Like, he was that competitive. It's like, I don't care how much it is. I want what's yours in my pocket because I'm going to beat you. It kind of sounds similar to Patrick Mahomes.
Yeah, on the process, we talked about that a little bit with Barbershop, Sean Barber. Mm-hmm. And yeah, any chance that there is a time to get competitive with Patrick, with Kelsey, I think what you have to do at the end of the day and what they do well is they let it get personal. They take it personal. You see like the Tom Brady's, Pat has learned a little bit from Tom, at least how he went about things. And Tom, if you watch some of his recent interviews since he's been out, he used to talk about how he would create scenarios that weren't even happen during the game. Like, what did he say? What did he say about us? And he would create this game within the game of saying like, no, we're going to beat. No, what? No, we're going to beat. I can't believe you'd say that. And, guys are in the huddle going like, we didn't hear anything. And he goes, no, that's what we're going to do. We're going to beat them all. That's why he wasn't friends with anybody. I remember Peyton Manning in Hawaii telling me in the pool, I'm sitting and Peyton is the king of all jokes. I'm walking and I've got like a couple of drinks for my kids. And I'm like, holding them like this. I'm just trying to get over to where, Christy's got a baby and I'm like getting them over. And Peyton's like, hey, Dustin, come here. And I was like, and our lounge chair is not like 2 lounge chairs or so over. I'm like, I'm just gonna, and he goes, no, it'll be really quick. And so I'm like, it's Peyton. All right. So I like walk over and he's standing on the stairs talking to a bunch of players with a shirt tucked into his bathing suit, like on purpose. These guys are like, this guy is like uber white boy. And he's like, hey, what do you think we're going to do Tennessee football next year? Do you think and I'm like, you're one of the bigger donors that we have over there. You know more than I know. And he's like, here, you can go he just wanted to, disrupt what I was doing, trying to get like, drinks over here to my family. But like, so we're dealing with like Patrick too, getting to kind of see how guys do their game. But Peyton, he didn't want anything that he could get. He's like, hey, you got to come down to your room, or you know what, let's start out in your room. What's your room number? We'll start in your room. And I'm like, oh no, I've heard this. You're going to charge everything in my room. We can't do that. This is my first go around to this deal. But I tell you all this because on the steps, he goes, I've been trying to call Tom Brady to come out and enjoy the week. I mean, I'll play most of the game if he'll just come out and like hang out with us. But Tom's already prepping for the next year. He doesn't want anything to happen. So he doesn't want to share any information. You don't want to talk about any process with any of these defensive guys you see in the pool. And so Tom, to that point, like we're getting to watch some of one of the greater 2 quarterbacks of all time, not information sharing. And so I think that's interesting that, Mahomes comes after, both of those guys, but also probably gets to share a little of information now that Tom's not playing. But I can't see him sharing it. He's got 2 and Tom's going like, I only got 5 in the distance, and he sees what they've been able to do there and amass the wins and the AFC championship games and Arrowhead. And so, but it's fun watching that. I say that kid because he's a lot younger than me, but it's fun watching Pat be able to do what he does at a high level. And sometimes when you hear Chiefs Kingdom saying like, we don't have any receivers, well, shit, we had one last night. Rice was amazing. And, sometimes it just takes, as and you said earlier in the show, sometimes it just takes that one guy to have an extraordinary game, or the other side, the other team that doesn't have the experience, trust in the analytics or do something stupid, and we take advantage because of our experience.
Yeah, absolutely. Hopefully that plays out again, as most likely scenarios the Chiefs end up facing the Buffalo Bills, unless for some reason the Steelers without TJ Watt can go and beat the Bills, which, I don't think that's going to happen. So it looks like likely Chiefs will be playing the Bills Sunday night up there in Buffalo, and some more weather. We'll have the watch party up at Holiday Distillery for anybody who's hanging out. All right, Dustin, before we wrap this up, any closing statements, any words of wisdom you want to leave the people with before we wrap this one up?
Yeah, I would just say, trust the process. I know they're doing that. You could see that with how many people are actually at that game and all the elements, still barbecuing, still drinking Boulevard, that they're passionate about their Chiefs fan. I probably should say just beverages there, but I think that you have to be patient. Those guys they spend countless hours. After coaching this past year, I really understand the time and effort that it takes to breaking down an opponent, and you're trusting all of your different departments to scout what we need to do and what we need to do best. And that showed. It's tough. Anytime you come from, South Beach, unless you fly in and practice at one of the local area high schools, you can't get ready for that kind of cold in Kansas or in Missouri, where we're right off of I-70 there. And they've been so tough to beat. They're going to be going on the road. They fared well on the road this year. We just haven't gotten a lot of the calls that go our way. I think that, I see this going well, and I'll support my claim. I see them going far and right in the middle of the Super Bowl this year.
Love it. I think next time you and I sit down and chat, and you'll be doing more stuff with us as we go forward, I would really like to do a breakdown. Somebody may have done this before, of counting up all the hours from the weight room, from phase 1, phase 2, phase 3, the off season, all of it. All of the practice time at training camp, all the meeting rooms, take all the hours put into prepping for a season together, and then divide that by the number of snaps that are played on average by an NFL player or by a team. And to say, for every snap that's on the field, that's 86 hours worth of work in the offseason from these guys. Because it's going to be something like that, but the amount of time spent prepping and then the amount of plays, there's so much work that's put in. That's the only thing I ever used to get pissed off about when I worked there. There's one thing that fans used to say that would piss me off is these guys don't care. They just want to collect a check. They're just doing it because they make a lot of money. It's like, you have no idea what these guys are putting themselves through and how much time and effort they're putting into this to make a comment like that. And they just don't know because they don't see it. I mean, helping guys up onto the plane after games that first year just because they were so sore and beat up trying to get on the team plane afterwards. It was one thing that people say that pissed me off, but man,
it's tough. Yeah, it's tough. It's tough hearing some of that. And I think it's just in anger because they haven't put the work in, and we live in an entertainment society. And I'll say to piggyback off that is, we have been very spoiled the last few years with Chiefs football. Yeah. And it's easy to look at some of the potential distractions going on and blame those and this and that. But the New England Patriots, the run that they made, those 3 Super Bowls and then the one after another, and then the last, that was a crazy run that they made. Not everybody can do that. And we've managed to play in 3 Super Bowls in the last few years. I mean, that is outstanding after a drought since, 50 years.
Yeah.
But those guys put that time in, and they do specialized workouts. I remember Tamba talking about, man, I just want to try to stay in this league and do everything I possibly can to work as hard as I can. I mentioned his name because he did the war drum up there, and I would watch him, and he would have a martial arts guy come in and bring a wrestling mat, being all white with the belt on, the whole 9 yards, and spar with people just wrestling. Sorry about that. Technology. That's why I don't do a court a lot, but I do it during these longer podcasts. I remember him bringing these wrestling mats, and people didn't want to jump in with him because he rained sweat, but he did anything he possibly could to know that his motor was never going to run out during a game. And I know watching him, I mean, that had to take years off of his life and years off of other guys' lives, just prepping to be in the trenches for Andy Reid and for whoever his head coach and his defensive coordinator was on game day. And those guys put in countless hours. I know they don't leave the facility. I'm sure Mahomes, 7, 8, 9, 10, whatever he can do to get one thought or one reaction or one quick thought of like, hey, this is what they're probably going to do in these situations. And knowing Andy Reid, anything he draws up, Mahomes can do. So they're putting that time in for sure. It's on that other side of the ball, how much of these other teams kind of prep for that and drafted for that and free agents for that. And that's what's going on here a little bit.
For sure. All right, man. Unbelievable stuff, Dustin. We appreciate you for joining us, and make sure I'll give you a chance to plug it here as we close out this show again. You'll be back first week in February with the benefit for Children's Mercy. Give you a chance to do that, but appreciate everybody for listening. Again, hit that like and subscribe, and we'll have plenty of more content you getting ready for the Chiefs divisional round matchup. Whoever it is, whether it's the Texans at home on Saturday or likely the Bills on the road Sunday night. And again, we'll be doing the watch party up at Holiday Distillery in Weston. There are limited spots, so make sure you get on our social media channels. We got the links. Sign up, reserve your spot, come hang out. We'll have Mission Taco up there. We'll have some drinks. Should be a good time. But Dustin, when you're back, for anybody who's listening that wants to come hang out and support, when and where can people find that information?
Yeah, definitely. I do a lot of stuff still back in city, whether it's podcast stuff or hospital work or Team Smile. I'm always trying to get back to KC, and so I can give you a bunch of information if you want to put out later. But the next time I was supposed to be here doing this live with you today, and just it's snowing in Knoxville, it's snowing all the way up in Crossville, the Plateau, Nashville. My flight got canceled at right before midnight last night, so I couldn't make it. But I'll be back 2nd, 3rd, and 4th of February in KC. Come out to Red Hot Night for Children's Mercy Hospital. We're just like we're the winter version of Big Slick in the summer that benefits all of those kids and benefits and all that money stays in Kansas City, and families and kids come in from all over. So that's my plug for KC and Children's Mercy Hospital. Great stuff, man. Love it. Love the support you still have for the city, and appreciate everybody for listening. And again, we'll have more content getting you ready for the upcoming matchup. The KC Lab guys will be going live tonight. Only Weird Games will actually be going live tomorrow. So a little change up on the schedule, but appreciate you all for listening, and we'll catch you next time. Thanks, BJ.